Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
You are very welcome back to Off the Ball on this Sunday. It's been a pretty comprehensive win for Ireland. 9 tries scored in all as they beat Italy by 57 points to 6 to keep Andy Farrell's side's chances of winning the Six Nations alive going into the last 2 weekends. They'll go to Twickenham in a couple of weeks' time to try and secure themselves a chance of a triple crown as well, with Scotland to come in the last game. France, of course, winning this weekend against Scotland at Midfield keeps them on top of the table. And England have still got a slim chance of winning the championship themselves after they beat Wales. Now, England still have got Ireland at home and France away. A difficult finish to the championship, but Ireland are still in contention to lift the trophy at the end. Malcolm O'Kelly's here with me. We'll be talking to James Downey from the Aviva Stadium, who was covering the game for us on Off the Ball in just a few moments. But you know, Mal, it was pretty comfortable. 57 points scored against an Italian team who played a lot of the game 2 men short, and particularly that Favia red card in the first half had a big impact on the game, because once he went off, the scrum started to go to bits. They were uncontested, and Italy were a man short all the time in their forwards, which allowed Ireland to dominate things up front for most of the game.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, that's just the way things happen, and it's tragic for the Italians. To go a man down, but then to end up going another man down, and they defended stoutly. To be fair to them, they continued with their press and they pushed. But I think more than anything, when they actually got hold of the ball themselves, they weren't able to hold on to it. The Irish defence was superb, and they forced them either to kick it or to turn over. And it was just an inevitability. It was just Ireland's wave after wave after wave, and then to unleash the bench. Then on top of that, and the tries just steadily came and came. You know, the Irish play. It's hard to actually say how good it was. It was loose. There was a lot of balls down. In the first half, really, that frustrated you because Ireland were a man up. They'd already got a couple of tries on the board. You're thinking, take control, take your time about this. And they were maybe forcing the offloads a little bit. Absolutely. Now, you know, that's the way the Irish are starting to play. And the Italians were flying up, and there was all or nothing for them. And generally, they actually were containing us to a degree. But once we kind of put them through the phases, because we were able to put a lot of good play together that got soft shoulders, we found some good gain lines, and then we found our overlaps, and then we made use of the fact that they were down men, and then we scored tries. I'm sure Andy Farrell will be with them, will talk to them about, you know, decision making. When do you ship it? When do you not ship it? When do you make these offloads and when not? Because you know, in 2 weeks' time in Twickenham, it's going to be 1 or 2 offloads that make or break the match. It's going to be a tight game. It's how Ireland use the ball that they have. They won't have the ball as much as they had against Italy. So England are very tough up front, very tough nut to crack. Okay, they weren't as potent as you know, they probably will be in a year or 18 months. But, you know, every game, you know, a couple of changes that might change things for them. So they have the basis of a very strong side. They have very strong individuals. It's just getting that relationship a little bit better, I think.
When it comes to that looseness, you can probably give me a player's perspective on this. Does this happen somewhat when it's a game like Italy where you're expected to win and the game feels fairly open already, that some of the risks that were taken, particularly late in that first half, wouldn't have happened at the Stade de France? That ball would have been taken into contact and they would have slowed things down. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because it's the player's choice to make the offload. I think when you've got that, you know, you're a man up. You can see the space outside. Like, you can see it's only a pass away. But you know, that pass is a tricky pass. That pass is a lobbed pass. The space is only, it's not really there. They're closing it. And I think Ireland fell into that kind of trap of, you know, yes, there's space there, but we're not actually manufacturing any space. We're just shipping it in across the pitch, and that happened numerous times. You know, like, you think you can get around them, but you actually can't. Even though they're only a man down or 2 men down, we still can't just get around them by just trying to run around them. You know, that's under 12 stuff.
they've got to be more intelligent and hold the defenders and then try and get around, and the space will be there if you force the defenders to actually defend and hold. And they did that though as well. Not to say that they didn't do that, but they just didn't do it every time. You know, they saw the space and went to it when it really wasn't there.
James Downey's with us as well at the Aviva Stadium. He's been watching the game for us here on Off the Ball. And James, just talking about how sometimes the game was a little bit too loose from an Irish perspective when they probably should have taken control. But your feeling in a general sense coming out of the back of that game, 9 tries, 57 points put on the board, is it a satisfactory day's work?
Yeah, I guess you have to say it is. It's job done, and it's on to the bigger one now in 2 weeks' time. I think even against 15 men, we were going to expect to get a bonus point try, and people were talking with the 50 regardless. So I feel that it is job done. I was listening to Mal talking there about earning that kind of right to go wide, and I completely agree with him. Sometimes we just try to get the ball into that space too early, too quickly, instead of just kind of sucking in 1 or 2 defenders and then actually getting and exposing the extra numbers, because ultimately they had 5. Like when they look at the video and off scrums, they only had 5 in that back line because you had to have the 8 men in the forwards, so they were actually down 2 in their backs. So if you're going to be down against England or Scotland against 5 men in the back line, you're going to have to execute. You're only going to get a couple of chances. So the execution levels, Andy Farrell mightn't be too happy with it. Also kind of handling errors, the 12 handling errors, which is high enough from an Irish perspective, and it's certainly something that Ireland are going to want to sort out before 2 weeks' time. Yeah,
the efficiency in the attack was maybe a bit better, James, in the second half with the way that the tries were taken. And something we were quite impressed with here in studio watching on the TV is that closing stage of the game, Ryan Baird gets up, blocks down that box kick and gets the reward of a try for himself. Mac Hansen towards the end of the game is making sure the ball doesn't go dead and putting in every effort to try and recycle it as well. It takes a little bit of hunger when you're already 40 points up to make decisions like that.
Yeah, I think it does. And someone like a Ryan Baird had been threatening to do something all day, and we did see him getting his gallop and open up and following up on a great pickup as well under pressure, and he didn't stop stride to pick it up. But yeah, I think someone like a Mac Hansen as well, these are the players that in the last 20 minutes you want them to have that hunger. That's exactly what you want to see. You want them to try and get their hands on the ball. These are the exciting players that have been brought in for a reason, and the reason is that they can score tries, so you'd expect them to have that hunger. And yeah, last couple of minutes, but they all want to get their hands on that ball. And I thought Mike Lowry as well, a bit of credit to Mike Lowry, who could easily have gone over for his own hat-trick and unselfishly threw it to James Lowe to score in the corner. So yeah, look, these guys, they're potent finishers, a lot of them, and you just want to get their hands on the ball. Even Johnny Sexton, when he came on, showed a little bit of oomph to go through a break and set up under the tries. So you want that hunger, especially from the bench. You want the bench to make an impact.
I know Mal was very impressed by Lowry, so I'll ask you about what you made of his performance today. Like, if you're a fullback, ideally you want to come up against a team who were stretched. He got 2 tries himself, as you mentioned. He laid on the try for James Lowe when he possibly could have went for the line himself. But I thought the Ulsterman acquitted himself very well today.
Yeah, I'd agree with you exactly. I think he wasn't tested too much at the back, but Italy didn't have the numbers and maybe had to change their game plan slightly. So I was pretty impressed with how he went about his business, and that was a perfect game for him, especially when they drop down numbers. There's going to be a lot of space. There's going to be a lot of heavy, tired forwards, and that's exactly what he's done for Ulster, and he's picked out that. But he took his lines well for his tries, and just that. The pass at the end, the 2-on-1 when he could have gone himself, it just showed his unselfishness and showed what a team player he is.
Mal, I'll give you first word. I know it makes way more sense to go to the centre on the argument about the Ireland midfield, but we'll let James listen in and come to you then. Irish midfield for Twickenham obviously depends somewhat on Robbie Henshaw. Went off in a little bit of pain there in the second half, and we had the Terry Butcher bandage on Gary Ringrose for a while in the second half. But assuming that Bundy Aki, Robbie Henshaw, Gary Ringrose are all fit for Twickenham in a couple of weeks, who do you pick?
Well, I think at the moment Robbie Henshaw is probably not quite game ready for that big game, so I would definitely go with Bundy and Gary.
They're a good combination in big games. We know that already. I think Bundy Aki probably benefited from the experience of being with the Lions last summer too. He also, depending on what happens at Manitou Ilagi, gives you that extra bit of beef in midfield as well, doesn't he?
I think currently the way the English midfield is set up, like having Bundy there, or even Robbie, but let's assume Bundy is there, like he is such a threat going forward. That midfield with Marcus Smith, Slade and Elliot Daly are not physically the most, they're not the most physical guys. They're not going to knock Bundy down. They're going to have to respect him, and then there'll be opportunities to get around them then, because they'll have to sit down on them. On the other hand, then when the English are attacking, there's going to be no way you're going to get through Bundy without feeling it. For me, that's where our advantage is. I'm sure James has spotted it as well. For me, Slade and Daly, they just did not have enough impact in the game, and I think that's where we're going to find some change.
James, I find as well when it comes to Bundy Aki, for any Connacht supporter who's been watching him in recent years, they know the ability that he has with the ball. He's been able to express himself a little bit more under Andy Farrell's system as well, which I think has actually made Bundy Aki a better international player too.
Yeah, I think so. I think, beforehand now, if you'd asked me a couple of months ago who I would kind of selected, I'd always kind of go, well, Robbie Henshaw and Gary Ringrose, who I nailed on, and it would be very hard for Bundy to do something to change our mind, because I think that Robbie is one of those players who you can drop in even if he's missed a while and he can produce. But I do think that under this current regime that Bundy's stepped up a level, and maybe your point about being on the lines, he's got a dose of confidence from that. But if we're looking at the English game in 2 weeks, I think he's certainly the man you want to play in there, regardless of if Tuolangi's there or not, especially with a Marcus Smith and a Henry Slade playing in 10 and 12. They're quite light, and you'd be using that big fella running down the channel, and Marcus Smith could be put off his game quite easily. So I think Bundy Aki has brought an awful lot more to the table than I initially imagined, but he'd be the certainly starter I'd go for in 2 weeks' time.
Well, James, maybe the decision's made a bit easier if Robbie Henshaw is injured. It's been very rare over the last 2 years or so that actually all three of them are fit at the one time and one has to be left out. If you're leaving out Gary Ringrose, or if you're leaving out Robbie Henshaw, who do you leave out for Twickenham then?
I don't know. I'd leave out Robbie. I'd leave out Robbie at the moment, because you just have to have. I just think Gary offers so much defensively. He's just not clicked, I don't think, going forward. But defensively, we notice him when he's not there, and there's massive holes when he's not there, because he's that defensive linchpin who talks and controls the forwards and controls the line and gives that confidence to his blindside winger, or both wingers even. And I think that Robbie hasn't played there for quite a while, and I know Bundy and Robbie could play together, but ultimately I'd like to see Bundy and Gary, everyone being fit.
James, when it comes to the back three then for London in a couple of weeks, we kind of assume Hugo Keenan comes in, despite how well Michael Lowry has played today. He comes back in at 15. Does Mac Hansen keep his place in the team? We decide whether that's at 11 or 14. Has James Lowe done enough with his couple of tries today to force the agenda to maybe get picked? Or are you picking Andrew Conway? What composition are you expecting for a back three here?
Oh, it's going to be a tough one, I think. I'd certainly go with Hugo Keenan coming back in a full back, just over in Twickenham in that cauldron. I think solidity personified at the back there. He hasn't put a foot wrong. He's been superb for Ireland over the past 24 months. So Hugo Keenan's kind of nailed down at 15. And then it's the question that you just said. I suppose, I'd like to see Mac Hansen stay on. I think he hasn't put a foot wrong in everything he's done. I know James Lowe had a decent cameo today. He knows what the line is. He knows how to score. He does offer something different, but I think just over in Twickenham I would revert back to Andy Conway again, another person who hasn't put a foot wrong, who just, if we do have to kick a little bit, who will chase everything all day. I just think that it would be Andy Conway, Mac Hansen and Hugo Keenan back three in Twickenham.
I can understand the line of thinking, Mal, that you bring in Conway, he's so solid, he's been a great try getter for Ireland in recent seasons too, that he probably deserves to start. Maybe Lowe's there as an option from the bench.
Yeah, I think it's a really good decision problem for Andy Farrell. I'm a big James Lowe fan, big left boot. could be important. We saw it today. He, so many of the good work of Ireland today went down through his channel. I think he's a game changer. As good as Conway is, I would have probably Conway and Hansen selection issue. That's where I would go, one or the other there.
Go on, which way are you going?
Just from what Andy Farrell has been like, I think he might go Hansen low. And then I agree. I think definitely Hugo Keenan back at 15. He hasn't put a foot wrong. And as good as Mike Lowry was today, we didn't really get to see him being really challenged up in the air. And we've seen Hugo Keenan, how good he is and how authoritative he is in the air. So he'll get my vote.
I think we go Jameson, Gibson-Park, Sexton as the picks at 9 and 10 for Twickenham. You were mentioning how Sexton came in and actually had quite a good impact on the game today. Considering he's come back from a hamstring injury, he's coming in from probably nursing that over the last 10 days or so. He was hungry to get out there and actually make a difference when he came on.
Yeah, I think he still has more authority there than Carbery. Carbery he's shown us what a beautiful footballer he is, what a great reader of the game he is, that he can allow the team to flow. But for me, Sexton, just the whole team revolves around him. He is the absolute heartbeat of that team, and when he's there, everything is in sync. And they looked absolutely supreme at the end. Again, the opposition with the men down, it's hard to get a good caller on it, but for me they just looked so good, and Casey in there now coming in, he looked really good, seamless, a handover, and he should be looked at as well.
James, when it comes to the Sexton versus Carbery debate, I think we almost assume that it's going to be Sexton who starts against England. But it's actually kind of worked out reasonably well with Carbery with the Sexton injury on the week of the France game, because we got to see for the very first time in the Six Nations a starting scenario for Joey Carbery against a strong team. It was more by accident than design with the injury, but we got to see a lot of Joey Carbery in Paris. We again got to see an hour of Joey Carbery today. Sexton gets to come on for 20 minutes. And realistically, those roles are going to be flipped when it comes to the England game. By the end of this Six Nations, Joey Carbery will have got some very significant game time in a season where he's been nursing injury for Munster really right up until Christmas.
Yeah, I think, and it's exactly that, significant game time, and it's against quality opposition rather than here's your token start against Italy and then we can revert the type again, and Joey doesn't get that game time. So yeah, I think that has been an advantage that Johnny was out, and I think he did extremely well 2 weeks ago. So look, he hasn't started in 2 years. He's been so unfortunate. It's been well publicised, all his injuries. So I think for Joey, for Ireland, for Johnny as well, to have someone pushing him and breathing down his neck, that can only be good for Irish rugby, and hopefully he can stay fit. But yeah, I expect Johnny Sexton to come straight back in, because again, I agree completely with what Mal said. He's the heartbeat of this Irish side.
James, looking at the forwards then, what do you make of Dan Sheehan getting his chance to start today?
I thought Dan was good today. I thought he offered himself a lot. He never stops working. I think you can see he nearly wants to he wants something to happen. He wants to create something. He wants a big break. He wants to get his name in the lights, and I think he might have been a little bit frustrated today. It was just a couple of times the Italian defence held on to his shorts a couple of times, and he could have made a break. A nice little 2-on-1 for Joey Carbery's try to start. But yeah, I don't think he's done enough at the moment to surpass Ronan Kelleher. But I think he's certainly breathing down his throat, and he can certainly kick on the next couple of weeks.
Mal, I'm a huge fan of Tyke Byrne. I think the guy is a turnover machine. He gets in there, gets a lot of the dirty work done. He's a classy ball player when he's on the front foot as well. Still question marks over what's his best position. Is it going to be 6? Is it going to be in the second row? It was a bit of a mix and match second row today with himself and Ryan Baird, two players who were very versatile as well. What do you think Tyke Byrne's ultimate best position is going to be for Ireland? Because I think he's becoming a starter now, as opposed to being a versatile player who could fit in.
Well, I think at the moment it's that second row position. I think today probably wasn't his most prolific game. I think the game was so open and Italy didn't have the ball, so there wasn't much chance for him to make those positive turnovers that we see in the big games. But for me, he's a shoe-in, and it's it's who you put with him, really. I'm presuming James Ryan is gonna come back in. So you've got a real solid physical second row set up there.
Yeah, I think at this stage it's good to have that competition too, because there was a point where we're wondering, were Ryan and Henderson going to just kind of gel together and be that first choice second row, and maybe who was there to challenge them. Like, genuinely, I thought Ryan Baird was excellent in the second row today. He did everything he really could have done to make himself an option coming down the track here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be probably a step too far to suggest that he overtakes some of those big senior second rowers. The question for Baird is, where do you find a position for him, and how valuable is his contribution against some of the other guys? Because if you look at the bench, you've got two pretty senior guys sitting that would expect to be sitting there for the Twickenham match, and the two guys in Henderson and
Ryan potentially coming back in,
and no, sorry, the Munster six. Sorry,
Peter O'Mahony.
Peter O'Mahony.
Yeah.
Those two boys on the bench. They're expecting to be there. So and their contribution is significant. So do you value Baird's more? That's your question.
Because you were saying having O'Mahony as a line-out option is actually quite a valuable reason to have him in the matchday squad.
Yeah, but then you look at Baird, and he won a huge amount of line-out. He's obviously very easy to get up in the air. Is he quite as intelligent as Peter O'Mahony around the park yet? Probably not. So that's another headache for Andy Farrell. And it's one that is more legitimate now. I think you go I think that it would be fair almost to give Baird an opportunity, because he's like, you could see with it today how destructive he was. And I think if you dug down and looked at his positive moments, they're all pretty spectacular. So there could be an opportunity there for him in the back as the backup six.
James, we were chatting earlier about England and how they played against Wales yesterday, and Mal's take was it was kind of a mixed bag from them realistically within the game, and they still have a few combinations that they need to work out. What's your assessment been of England in the Six Nations so far? Because I'm sure the way Eddie Jones will be painting this is narrowly beaten against Scotland, this championship is not gone, get a win against Ireland and it's wide open again.
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly what I'd be saying to them. Look, I haven't been overly impressed with them, but just there's just something about them over there. I think that's going to be a tough one, and Twickenham's always a tough place to go, but just up to now they just haven't kind of fired on all cylinders. There's been a bit of chopping and changing in their personnel, who they're bringing in, and especially for me it's got to be that kind of midfield, especially against Wales. They just lacked that. Okay, they got over the line, but that's a pretty poor Welsh side, and we saw them here in the Aviva, and they are a poor side no matter what happens. And I think that England can be got at, and I'm sure we can get to them over there. And I think a thing that stands to us in our favour is our consistency in selection as well, and we do have quality players who are just behind. Even Mal talking about like Ryan Baird, and who do you choose? You have a Peter O'Mahony, and you have an Ian Henderson, you have a James Ryan, you have quality players there. England have young quality players, but I just think that if Ireland are going to take them in 2 weeks' time, that it's going to be in that area. I think if obviously getting parried up front, but if we get parried up front, I'm sure we can take them on their midfield, because just the combinations, they just haven't got a settled side.
I think, James, if I was an England supporter yesterday watching on at that game at Twickenham, I would be wondering how Wales were actually still left in the game even when the clock was on the red. Now, Wales were lucky enough to get another opportunity to try and run down the field again, but England had so many chances during the game and had so much of the ball that there's no way Wales should have been within a score going into those closing few minutes. No,
and that's got to be that massive worry of that they shouldn't be in this game whatsoever, and yet they're still hanging on by the coattails, which is going to be worrying from an England supporter's perspective, and I'm sure Eddie Jones, but he's going to flip that and use that, and I'm sure we'll see some interesting comments from him now leading up to the game in Twickenham, but I'm sure he'll try and take a bit of deflection away from his players, but I think that that they were close, but they'll have got the win and say, okay, look, we've gotten that win, we've gotten away with it, we won't be as bad again, and let's focus on taking the Irish, and we're back at home, we're back at Twickenham. So I think that's going to be the area where Eddie Jones will focus on.
Let's see if there's more scummy Irish comments during the week. As venues go to play in, Mal, what's Twickenham like? Is it intimidating? I was there for the game in 2018 when Ireland won, and Ireland silenced the crowd entirely. It was at the warm-up game before the World Cup in 2019 when Swing Low Sweet Chariot was being sung for most of the game, and England put 50 points up on Ireland. Two very different occasions. As a player, what's it like going into Twickenham to play?
It's a cauldron. It's a supreme venue. When you're standing there, and the national anthems are singing.
Do you feel the weight of history? Because you walk in, you go by all the statues. And
it is beautiful, yeah. But to be honest with you, you're sitting in the bus, and the police car is trying to wade you through all the crowd, and they don't really do their job very well. And you're waiting for ages. You just want to get into the changing room, and you got your headphones on. You're pretty focused. But when you come out, the noise is exceptional. And I've been there for some tough days, and we've been there for some magical days. The one in 2003 when, or 2004 should I say, wasn't
Shane Horgan's Mr. Inspector Arm just about.
That was 2 years later when we won a Triple Crown. Yeah, that was spectacular. Like, so we've had some great days there, but they tend to be tougher days than good days. So it's a big ask. It's always a big ask to win in Twickenham. A very proud nation. And as well, I think this is the first time they've been back. The first season they've been back with crowds. And as I said, this is a young squad that they're building, and every match you can expect this English team to get better and better. It's all about, for them, it's all about trying to build these relationships, learn about each other, work on the combinations, work on their strategy, work on each other's lines, and what's the best way to go. So Ireland will have to be super clinical. We saw today a lot of ball go on the ground, and a lot. And you'd expect, as long as that stuff doesn't get swept under the carpet, that they try and nail that. Figure out what's going wrong. That will be important for them. As James said, they'll need to be dominant, or certain have parity anyway up front. Which I would expect them to have. The line-out will need to function, then if they can just get that physical dominance in midfield, we'll see the guys in a bit of space out wide then, and their continuity at times has just been exceptional. It's been unparalleled in the Six Nations so far. So we've seen some really good things from this Irish team, and we've seen some ordinary things from this Irish team. So it's about just trying to really nail down the good stuff, and try not to push things too much.
Well, our rugby coverage here is with thanks to Vodafone. We're all in, the team of us. Check out the hashtag throughout the Six Nations. But I want to ask both of you, I'll start with you, Mal, about France. You talk about physical dominance. They were able to bully Scotland in the second half in Edinburgh yesterday, and again, that gives a platform for those ball players. You got Dupont and Entomac to move the ball around for you. Space is going to come up, and this French team are still going to navigate Wales and still to navigate England if they're to win a Grand Slam and if they're to win the Six Nations Championship, but they look very impressive a year out from the World Cup.
Yeah, they really do. And we talk about Entomac and we talk about Dupont and their creativity. Is incredible, but their defensive system is just absolutely fantastic. They're so powerful, so physical. Scotland had absolutely no answer. They really couldn't string very much together. They did well to stay in that first half. And actually, they could have gone ahead. Scotland could have gone ahead, but for some bizarre decision making on a 4-1 overlap.
It sounds like a very familiar story when it comes to Holger, Finn Russell.
Like Finn Russell probably didn't have his best day. May not have suited him. Just the level of he had very little time to make decisions, and some loose kicking, which is kind of a typical Russell display. But they were at home. They couldn't press any. They couldn't really apply pressure on France. France were so comfortable throughout that game, and they scored some lovely tries. They scored it was just they scored some tries from mauls. They scored some tries from they just took their opportunities. They made Scotland pay for their mistakes, for their ill discipline. Without really having to ramp up through the gears. They just looked so good, and you don't. I don't really see them tripping up with either. They have to go to Cardiff. Just cannot see how Wales will beat them, even at home. And then for England to go over to Paris and spoil the party. Just can't see it happening.
Especially if Ireland were to win in Twickenham in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, well, who knows? Yeah, that would be great for us, of course. But with the Grand Slam so close, the momentum will be there. I just can't. I couldn't see it. Can't see it not happening now.
We'll never see an end of a championship like them in Wales last year, though. Bloody hell,
but you never know. That's the Six Nations for you. I
wouldn't mind if it finishes that way. If England have to go and get a win to deny France a Grand Slam and the championship. James, your assessment of France's performance against Scotland, then, because the narrative at this stage seems to be, as we go into the second break week, that realistically it's now France's championship to lose.
Yeah, I completely agree with it. Having watched it yesterday, just there was such a statement of intent, I think, from France. Just how comfortable they were in Murrayfield, and just to re-emphasise Mal's point on the defence, I think Sean Edwards in there has brought an extra dimension to that French defence, and just the turnovers when they hold the players. Their pack are so big and strong, and they get around the ball carriers, they turn them over, and from turnover they're such strike runners to attack from anywhere, and I was extremely impressed with how they did things. And yeah, I just can't see them being beaten at the moment, and in the form they're in, and they're not afraid to go away and produce a running display. And I think that they'll win against the Welsh, and then certainly I don't think the English are gonna cause them too much trouble in Paris.
Well, wait and see now. The Welsh will make mugs of all three of us by playing brilliantly in Cardiff out of nowhere, and they'll wrestle another win against Le Bleu. James, thanks a million for joining us in the Aviva. Mal, thanks a million for coming into studio to watch the Italy game with us. Full time in the game between Limerick and Cork. It's just finished at the Gaelic grounds, and dominant from Cork, who have won once again, 3 wins out of 3. They've overcome Limerick by 219 to 1 goal and 13. And just a reminder as well that rugby here on Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone. They're official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in. And the Carabao Cup final is still 0-0 between Chelsea and Liverpool. We'll take a short break. We'll be back in a moment.
Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.